What if boredom was the ultimate conspiracy they kept from you? There's a reason why every algorithm, every app, every platform is designed to keep you stimulated 24/7. It's not just about advertising revenue. There's something far more sinister at play. When your mind never experiences true emptiness, it never develops the one capability that separates rulers from the ruled, the ability to see what's really happening beneath the surface. Noise. Ancient Stoics weren't philosophers sitting around discussing abstract concepts. They were operators. Seneca advised emperors. Cicero shaped republics. These men understood something that modern psychology is only now rediscovering. Prolonged boredom rewires your brain's threat detection system. It strips away false urgency and reveals what actually matters versus what merely feels urgent. Fabius Cunctator, the Roman general who defeated Hannibal through strategic delay, spent weeks in deliberate isolation before major decisions. His enemies mocked him as the delayer. History remembers him as the shield of Rome. While Hannibal burned through resources chasing spectacular victories, Fabius simply waited. In that enforced emptiness, he saw patterns invisible to minds addicted to constant stimulation. Power Law 16 teaches us to use absence strategically, but there's a deeper layer. External absence creates mystique. Internal absence creates superhuman clarity. When you strip away every distraction, something dies inside you. Your false self, built on reactions and conditioning, begins to crumble. What emerges is far more dangerous. Here's your first practical action. Carve out 3 30-minute sessions weekly where you do absolutely nothing. No music, no books, no screens. Just you facing the void. Your mind will scream for stimulation. Those first few days, let it scream. By week 2, you'll start accessing cognitive capabilities you didn't know existed. Declassified documents suggest elite military programs experimented with forced boredom as psychological warfare training, not against enemies, for their own operatives. The goal was creating decision makers who couldn't be manipulated through emotional triggers. Drop void in the comments if you're ready to weaponize silence. How long can you sit with your thoughts before panic sets in? Hit that like button if this makes you uncomfortable, and subscribe, because what comes next reveals how emperors built dynasties using exactly this technique. But emptiness has layers. And the next one explains why monarchs banned their subjects from practicing it. How elites used mental starvation to decode reality. Here's something historians rarely connect. Right before major empires collapsed, citizens were flooded with entertainment. Constant festivals, games, spectacles. Bread and circuses wasn't just distraction. It was a targeted weapon to destroy one specific capacity, the ability to think without external input. A population that can't tolerate boredom is a population that can't recognize manipulation. Cato the Younger had a practice his rivals thought was insanity. Before Senate debates, he'd lock himself in an empty room for hours. His opponents arrived with rehearsed speeches and complex strategies. Cato arrived with something different, disturbing clarity about the real intentions behind every word spoken. He saw through deception because he trained his mind in absolute emptiness. Power Law 3 warns us to conceal our intentions. But how do you uncover others' hidden agendas? In deep boredom, your mind stops projecting expectations onto reality. You begin seeing what's actually there and what you want to be there. That's the gap between illusory power and real power. Byzantine manuscripts describe a secret practice among imperial elites: mental fasting. It wasn't about food. It was deliberately starving the brain of new stimuli for extended periods. Some scholars speculate this technique enabled a form of cognition we consider impossible today. Decisions accounting for variables the normal conscious mind can't process simultaneously. There's a theory that certain mystery schools in ancient Greece used sensory deprivation not for spiritual enlightenment, but for tactical advantage, creating leaders with one specific edge: immunity to emotional manipulation. During high-stakes moments, when your mind has been stripped down to bedrock repeatedly, surface-level psychological tricks stop working. Your second practical action: identify the 3 distractions you use to escape your thoughts. Social media, news, podcasts, whatever. Eliminate one completely for 7 days. Watch how your mind reacts initially and how it transforms by day 7. Type clarity in the comments if you recognize how many terrible decisions you've made because your mind was too saturated to think straight. What's the distraction you're most terrified to abandon? Drop your answer below. And if you're starting to understand why this is never taught in schools, smash that like button. But the real weapon hasn't been revealed yet, and it involves what happens after boredom breaks you completely. Why silence became the secret weapon of invisible empires. The part nobody mentions about deep boredom is the terror before transformation. When you finally strip away distractions, you don't find peace immediately. You find raw anxiety. Every worry you've been avoiding surfaces at once. Here's the secret: Stoics didn't run from this. They sat in that fire until it burned away everything weak inside them. Livia Drusilla, wife of Augustus and one of Rome's most powerful figures, practiced something contemporaries documented with awe and fear. Before major political moves, she'd enter total seclusion for days. No servants, no elaborate meals, no entertainment. Just her and her thoughts. When she emerged, her strategies were so precise and ruthless that enemies believed she possessed supernatural abilities. Power Law 28 teaches us to enter action with boldness. But where does real boldness come from? Not from ignorance or impulse. It comes from having stared at your deepest fears in absolute emptiness and realized they were just ghosts. When you face extreme boredom, your mind eventually stops generating imaginary threats. What remains is cold, accurate assessment of what's real and what's possible. Intelligence agencies discovered something fascinating during Cold War psychological research. Subjects exposed to extended periods of zero stimulation initially experienced severe anxiety, but those who pushed through emerged with dramatically enhanced pattern recognition and threat assessment capabilities. The programs were classified. The technique wasn't meditation, it was weaponized emptiness. Your third practical action: when anxiety surfaces during your void ritual, don't fight it. Observe it like an external object. Name each anxious thought that appears. Within 20 minutes, you'll notice anxiety loses power when it doesn't receive your resistance energy. Write empire if you're ready to use your demons as fuel instead of running from them. What did you discover about yourself when truly alone with your thoughts? Like this? If it's clicking in a disturbing way. And now comes the final part. What happens when you completely master this technique? And why they never wanted you to know. Se vac nunca mais pudes esser controlado. After you cross through boredom's hell and emerge on the other side, something irreversible happens. You become unmanipulable. Advertisements stop working. Emotional speeches seem transparent. You see the strings moving, the puppets. And that's precisely why this technique never went mainstream. People with deep mental clarity don't follow blindly, don't consume compulsively, don't react predictably. Gaius Mucius Scaevola, the Roman who thrust his hand into fire to prove his resolve, spent years training his mind through deliberate isolation before that legendary moment. Historical accounts mention he practiced what he called confronting the inner furnace. His contemporaries thought he was preparing for physical torture. He was actually building psychological imperviousness through mastering emptiness. Power Law 38 warns us to think as you like, but behave like others. But there's a level beyond that. When you master the void ritual, you think so differently that you can perfectly simulate normal behavior while executing strategies nobody else can conceive. You're not just one step ahead. You're playing an entirely different game. Certain military strategists throughout history exhibited an unusual pattern. Before critical battles, they disappear for days. No planning meetings, no strategy sessions, just silence. When they returned, their decisions seemed almost prophetic. Critics called it luck or genius. It was neither. It was clarity achieved through deliberately facing the emptiness most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Your fourth and final practical action: commit to 30 days of this ritual. Document how your decisions shift, how priorities reorganize themselves, how relationships that seemed important reveal themselves as superficial, and connections you ignored prove essential. By the end, you won't be the same person. Real power was never about controlling others. It was always about controlling the only thing that truly matters, your own mind. And the mind only reveals its secrets in absolute silence. Stoics knew this. Empire builders knew this. Now, you know it too. Type truth in the comments if you're starting your void ritual today. What was the biggest revelation this video gave you? Drop it below. Like this content, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the world doesn't need more distracted people, it needs minds sharp as blades. The silence is waiting. Question is, do you have the courage to enter it?